Origins of Civilization. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. I see the cephalopod got moved.
Yes, it is now on the mantle.
It is on the mantle. So this ought to be an interesting episode. There's a couple of things that I think we should talk about. So I was thinking about...
First, we should introduce the Watcher. He is actually here with us, and there are
we don't need to do
giant
that. I mean,
fans of the Watcher
no
who
one
hate
cares
us
about the
because
Watcher.
we don't ever introduce him when he's not here. How's it going, Watcher? Welcome.
It's going great, fellas, and let me set these fans straight. All right? Russ and Kyle make extreme efforts to move things around so that I can be here, but I work a job where my schedule sucks. And I guarantee you 95% of the time, when I'm not here, it's entirely my fault.
or the fault of your job, not your fault.
Yeah, I mean, life happens. But I mean, the fact that there are people who are motivated to blame Russ and Kyle for that anyway.
No, it's always our fault.
Absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
He's taking it easy on us, folks. A lot of times it is our fault.
But
And then he'll be here and we don't introduce him. It's true. It does happen.
That never happened.
3 out of 10 times, if we're being honest.
Listen, that one guy that uses all those different usernames online and complains that we don't introduce the Watcher. I'm talking to that one.
Oh, that's what's happening. Wow.
I'm gonna have to,
Kyle has seen straight through you, bro.
I'm going to have to send Tom a little bit more money on PayPal so I can keep that going.
We're going to start a Watcher OnlyFans. Right?
It is great to be here, though. Super glad to be here, especially on an episode where there's a little less direction and a little more improvisation.
This is my favorite kind of episode when we have no topic. We don't, I tried to think about it. What am I going to talk about?
What do you mean? I have a 60-page document.
No, you
read
don't.
From.
You see? He can't do it, folks. He's like, we don't have a topic. We'll just wing it. And I'm like, all right. And then I thought for a few minutes, like, maybe I should. And then I got sidetracked. So I don't have anything.
I knew Kyle wouldn't come up with anything, so I knew it was going to be fun.
But I always come up with great shit on the fly.
Yeah. So, I did. Okay. So what I had was some direction. By the way, Watcher, thanks for being here as always, buddy.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope you get better. I know you're a little under the weather up there in space.
He's actually over the weather.
Over the weather.
Yeah.
In space. Not feeling great. So, but he's still here.
He's under the space weather.
Dedication, folks. That's right. There he is, under the space weather. So I did have a couple of ideas, and one of them was I was thinking about how much our Egypt trip affected how we look at everything in Egypt. And the massive difference, in some ways, between what we thought about a lot of the stuff in Egypt before we went there versus after we had gone.
I thought the same thing.
That's great.
I thought about, maybe I should read up on Gobekli Tepe and talk about it on this episode.
Yeah.
Because we're about to go see it and then have a comparison.
But this also highlights a wider topic that I have been thinking about, and that is, I've found myself almost hesitating to discuss other sites that we used to talk about all the time, like stuff in Peru, because I'm like, dude, I haven't been there. And Egypt changed so much about...
It's a broader point.
Yeah,
yes.
it changed so much about what I thought about Egypt. And, we've gone back and still, like, going back and you see more and you're learning more and you're like, this is how you have to learn about it. You can't... armchair discussion and research takes you so far, but until you stand in front of these things, it's just not the same. At least it isn't for me, especially when you're looking at it from a...
Well, there's numerous aspects, right? There's standing in front of it. Then there's also being taught directly about it while you're there with someone who's been there their whole lives.
Yeah.
Or even somebody who's just traveled there many times, like Ben, for example, who's gotten he is also like you're learning even in the discussions around the table, at dinner.
Yeah.
Are like with
when
people like Yusuf and
get them out of the gutter, they're really good. Depends on what table you sit at.
Yeah. I'm trying to say it's enhanced.
Sorry, I derailed him.
No. I'm really trying to refine the idea. It's enhanced even more so because just standing in front of the site for yourself, that's not the whole picture.
Sure. Yeah.
Being there with people that also have studied it and have insight and have been there multiple times.
Yeah.
That can tell you the things they've learned. You're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Again and again.
Yeah.
So reading Petrie, like Graham Hancock, all of that is useful and very useful when you're standing there. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, like just being able to walk around and discuss it with Ben and with Yusuf and the other scholars and people that are on the tours. It's just beyond anything you can do from the armchair, as you say.
Yeah. But all I'm saying really that you're correct about that, like the detail you went into there about what is happening when you go. What I'm saying is it's been interesting to me how I'll think about like, well, what's happening in Peru, and I'll look at some things and read about some stuff, and I'm just like, I know now the depth of my ignorance about these, and so I'm just like, I don't even know what to think about it. I have to go see it. Because of how much going to Egypt changed.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So now I'm like, obviously, it really for me to be able to feel like I can that I'm able to discuss a particular site in depth with true thoughts about that site is after having crawled through it, walked through it, looked at it, put my hands on it. That's what I'm saying. So I don't know if this is a good thing or not, like surely I need to be able to discuss these things academically, having not been there. But I find myself hesitating to do so because of how much, my ideas about Egypt changed after going there.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And in a way, I thought the same thing because I was thinking like, a cool topic for tonight would be Gobekli Tepe.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't have time to like really go read up. I know there was like a lot written about it in Magicians of the Gods, but then of course like maybe going and looking at what was his name, Klaus Schmidt, like his journals or any of his papers that he published on it, or maybe even revisiting some of the stuff that Martin Sweatman talked about. And I was just like, it'd be cool to kind of go through all this and then discuss the site, knowing that we're about to go there and have our minds completely changed about it, and then have that comparison. Like here's what we can think about it beforehand, and then here's what happens after.
Yeah,
so it'd be
exactly.
Like
that's yes. So back to that is I was thinking that could possibly be part of the topic tonight. Is like, what do we think about this now? But when I think, that's what I'm saying. What I think about it is that I just don't know enough. And I haven't been there.
Right.
That's what I think.
Yep.
Now, I don't think we're going to be pursuing. There's a lot in Egypt that's, well, maybe we'll find it in Turkey as well. But I think that in Egypt, there's a lot of details and nuance about, like precision. I don't think we're going to be looking at precision in these sites in Turkey. Now, maybe we'll see some evidence, maybe some stuff in the museums.
Yeah, but I think too about, of course, there are the museums, which we've been told are there's just like amazing artifacts
Yeah.
in there, and you don't see a whole lot about that
Right.
when you read about Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
So, I was just thinking about just being on the ground, like you're saying, and because there's no trees, and you're just looking out, and there's like the hills and stuff, and you're seeing these mounds, and we get to walk on the site and see how big it is. That's one of the things. It's just like how enormous these places are. It's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
And so I'm imagining that happening again, and maybe getting the lay of the land might be that was one of the things that really blew me away about the Megalithomania video where he's walking around Karahan.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, like he's looking out in the distance. He's like, there's another mound over there, and then there's one, and you're just like, holy crap.
Yeah.
This is insane. And then of course there's sites all over the place nearby that are, we might be able to get to go see. So I don't know. Yeah, we're ignorant for sure.
Yeah. I really do hope we get to kind of hike around, maybe get over to some of the quarry sites. I also don't know the state of the sites right now, so that'll be another interesting thing. I've seen lots of photographs, but their stuff has been changing quick because of, they have been continuing to do archaeological work, and also they're simultaneously turning it into a tourist destination. So.
Yeah. Watcher has some thoughts. Come on. What's up, old boy?
He refuses to type anything these days, folks.
No, I was
the
gonna say
sole
that,
reason
like,
for
one
the
of
chat room is for him to ask to come on and say stuff now.
One of, I think, the greatest benefits that I would have on going on an Egypt trip, now with you guys being 2 trips deep and Ben so much further, is the things that I might see and things I might initially think, right? And then you guys going, no, I totally see that. That's what I thought too. And then you give me what you've built upon that. And maybe you talk me out of it, maybe you don't. I still pursue that, but it's like an accelerated move through my views on Egypt, right? Potentially. Because I know you guys, you know me. Just from going on one trip, being able to build on your experiences over multiple trips. Because if you say something and it makes sense, like I look at something and think, oh, well, here's my first conclusion. Those blocks must mean this. And you're like, yeah, I thought that too. But look, you see this type of marking here, the fact that they're present in this place, and this place, it makes more sense, don't you think, if it was actually this? And I get to jump light years ahead. I don't have to think my way through that.
Yeah, Yusuf and Ben do that.
Oh, yeah,
as well.
yeah. That makes way more sense, and I just get to jump way out into the future.
Yeah, that was kind of my point too. Is it's not just being there, but being there with people who have been there much longer, right. And then so you get more context.
And then the typical thing in academia, right, is you have Egyptologists, you have Inca archaeologists that are specializing in that. You have people that are specifically focusing on Turkey and the sites there. But what is it that we have to gain from people who have gone to all 3 with an open mind? It's not a thing that I know. I mean, aside from Graham Hancock and the work that he's done and some of the other people in the books that they've written where they make these comparisons, it's not a thing that's commonly done. And I think the ambition to do that is fantastic. Like you see pictures of the jaguars in South America and in Turkey, and the fact that they're not only similar but almost identical. What does that mean? Well, if you have background of all of these ancient megalithic sites, it gives you a unique perspective to maybe kind of come up with some theories on what that type of stuff means.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Graham really, obviously he's been freaking all over the place and done this to such an extent. It's like, yeah, I don't know what to say. I don't know about outdoing that guy.
Yeah.
He's been to so many places, and his way of like, digging up sources and documenting all that is just beyond the pale. He's awesome.
Well, I mean, I guess my thought is that he's kind of one of the few people to have done it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the
very
prospect
useful.
of being able to take, even individuals as like you two or the three of us or groups to do that same thing, what potential gain could come from that? I mean, it's kind of like exciting as a concept to crowdsource that same, I don't want to call it like an omniscience or an overview of all of those things, but to have people experience all of those sites within the ancient world and see how many parallels appear, how many commonalities show up, or how many unique things in one site that are explainable. It's exciting to me. Like it is very, very exciting that we live in a time where that is a thing that can start happening.
For sure, man.
Yeah. And in large part, for me, a lot of this is about, I know people say things like, well, I want to know the answers, or I'm looking for the answers to the questions. And for me, it's, in some cases, it's more like, I want to know which ones are the right questions. I've said this a bunch, but I mean, you go to Egypt and you can you start to see like, okay, this is mysterious, right? This over here is amazing and beautiful, and it's excellent to visit it, but it isn't necessarily mysterious, right? It can be explained, has been explained, right? So that's the other thing is for me is to go through and find out which parts of these places are really mysteries in terms of like they haven't been explained. There's not a good explanation, for either the construction or the precision or the materials or the logistics, whatever. And so I imagine, and I'm hoping that this will happen when we go in Turkey as well. There's going to be a bunch of sites we go to, and hopefully, in terms of being interested in possibly a lost civilization or something like that just like going to Egypt, that it'll be easier to identify when you're there. Like, is that what we're looking at? Now, obviously, with Gobekli Tepe, it's a given, right? I mean, even mainstream is basically saying that this is
The lost civilization.
Yeah. Now, that, like Ben says, they just, changed the definition of hunter-gatherer in order to say that hunter-gatherers built the place. But it's basically saying, well, here's a lost civilization. These people were, or at least in the same area, all this stuff was happening at the same time. Like, they were inventing, megalithic construction. They were inventing agriculture, and they were domesticating animals. Like, all of this is happening in this similar area at the same place. So that to me seems like either civilization is getting started, which is a mystery. Like, just like what happened here? Why did people just show up and say, let's try this civilization thing. Let's see if we can, instead of moving around and hunting and gathering, let's stay in one place and just change everything around us to fit what we want.
I'm looking forward to actually looking at the excavation itself, like at Karahan Tepe.
Yep.
Because it's easy to say, well, this site was intentionally buried.
Yeah. That is one thing I'm looking
I shouldn't say
to
that's
see.
easy to say, but they obviously say
easy
it
to
for a
say
reason. It's easy to say it,
Yeah.
but they say it for a reason. They have a reason. I want to look at the walls, like where they've dug and they've left. Like, here's the wall that shows the stratigraphy. I would like to be able to see something like that
Yeah.
and see what this intentionally buried stratigraphy looks like. You know what I'm saying? Like, of course, I've seen.
I mean, I've read a few things about what it looks like. And
same.
Yeah.
Like
But I agree with you. I
That there
wanna
are
see it.
layers of like flagstone type things,
Yep.
and then there's more layers of just dirt and stuff, and
Yeah.
whatever. I want to see that.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps there's who knows. That's definitely, you know, I want to go look at the wall. That's kind of the way I think about it.
And
But-
Nimrut, we're going to get to see that.
I've seen, you know, in excavations of campsites around Texas, like just ancient Native American sites, like on the, like, say there's excavations going on in a river valley, and you'll see occupation layers, like in a ditch or something, and you can see the stratigraphy of the rock that is supposedly laid down haphazardly over thousands of years.
Yeah.
Bricks and, you know, chunks and then arrowheads and whatever.
Yep.
And you can really kind of look at it and see sort of a layering of it. Maybe there was a flood deposit, and there's some
There's
river
5
gravel.
inches of just fine material
Yeah.
with nothing in it, and then more midden on top of that.
It's always it's interesting.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, Randall has taught us about flood deposits and looking at the stratigraphy of flood deposits and seeing and being able to read that. It will be interesting to see something that's intentionally buried.
Yes.
Like that. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe there's clues in it. Who knows? But I remember in Egypt at Elephantine Island, there's a wall
Yeah.
of potsherds, basically,
Yeah.
that they dug through. I mean, it's like 15 feet high
Yeah.
or whatever. Who knows? It's huge. And it's just almost solid pottery
Yeah.
mixed with dirt, right? It's just every layer, and there's just shattered pottery just going down and down and down.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing.
Yes.
And the idea is that people were just living on that site, and it's just accumulating midden. I don't know.
What was the other site that was like that, where the labyrinth is supposed to be underground?
Yeah.
It was just the ground. We were walking around. It's just nothing but pottery
Yeah.
in a
Yeah, it's
huge
wild.
area. Yeah. And you just don't know. Like, has it been dumped there?
Well, that
You know?
place too was just, there were just potholes everywhere
Yeah.
where people had just dug
Been
in
digging.
one spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Gobekli Tepe is different in that sense, that it just hasn't been potholed.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we've run across many times out here when you come upon a midden mound. I've only seen maybe a handful or less that were pristine.
Yeah.
Almost every one had been potholed at some point, or
Yeah.
maybe it was just it had been plowed over, or it was dozed.
Yeah. Or it's
So-
being washed out.
Yeah, or being washed out by a creek
Yeah.
or something. So yeah, that'll be that's one thing about Gobekli Tepe is it just no one thought it was anything important for so long,
Yeah.
at least in modern times.
Yeah. And I do wonder about I think you're right that the burying is going to be an interesting question. I mean, I've seen, you know, you look at their recreations of the site, and you've got the T-pillars, and it sort of looks megalithic, and then there are these cobblestone walls,
Right.
and I'm just like, are you sure?
I've thought that same thing. Like maybe those were built later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole, like, you know, does the temple precede the civilization thing? 'Cause I think the initial, you know, I think Klaus Schmidt was basically saying this, and this I might have read this in one of Graham's books. But there was this idea that, you know, you start out with that basically the temple follows civilization. You know, the idea of this power center, a religious power center. But Klaus Schmidt is saying that Gobekli Tepe shows that the temple preceded it. You know. Now, I don't know. Is that a
If you build it, they will come.
right? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Is it a a view that has been constrained too much by mainstream concepts? You know, or is that really what happened? That what you would think of as a more typical hunter-gatherer nomadic group, you know, eventually developed their religious ideas to the point to where they decided that they're going to build something monumental with those ideas incorporated. It doesn't make enough sense because of how enormous the site is. It isn't one circle of stones, right? Maybe if it was one circle of stones and then a sort of a village builds around that, and then those people, you know, they're like, let's stay here because now we have our temple.
Yeah, they don't even really know where the oldest one is.
Right.
They think maybe Gobekli Tepe is, but
yeah, Karahan Tepe is older, isn't it?
oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like this isn't, you know, we've all heard that like less than 5% of Gobekli Tepe has been dug up, and now you have Karahan Tepe. It's a whole other hill.
Yeah.
So it's just like this isn't a small site. It's an enormous thing, and I don't know.
And I mean, the likelihood that they'll find a whole nother mountain range somewhere that just has a whole bunch more is, I mean, I think that's highly likely.
Right. And then, of course, this is one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to going to the museums, because they have found sculptures and statues and
yes. But this brings up another point, like the idea that the temple precedes the civilization. I think in most cases that's the truth, because I think like even thousands of years after the Egyptian civilization had passed, that their civilization spurred enlightenment in other civilizations from the artifacts that were discovered, or the idea that maybe the ancient Egyptians themselves showed up to the area and found temples or pyramids or something already there.
Yeah.
Primordial mounds,
Structures
quote unquote,
and
structures, which spurred their civilization on. Right. This is a common belief or idea amongst the alternative camp.
Yeah.
So yes, the temple precedes the civilization in many cases, if not most, because you can't really take any known civilization, I think, on the planet and take it back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it just, you know, everything that we find, I guess Gobekli Tepe may be unique in the sense that there's not a direct linear connection between that site and others, other than maybe megalithic architecture and agriculture.
I mean, that's another great question. I mean, I don't want to sidetrack you, but real quick,
Go
another
ahead.
great question I would
It's
love.
tangent cube, Boba.
Yeah, is where did these people go? Like,
Yeah.
do they have any, you know, could we say like, hey, they're, you know, the people who did this eventually ended up here? That would be amazing to find out. I don't know if there's
Ended up here?
just anywhere
where
you could basically point and say like the people who did this, here's their migration pattern, and they ended up over here. Or they were invaded and they were mostly killed, but the rest of them were taken. You know what I'm saying? Like, what happened to them?
Yeah.
Do they have any descendants?
Yeah.
It'd be fun to find out. But back to what you're saying, I agree with you. Like you're kind of digging into the idea of the temple preceding civilization. I totally agree. What I'm telling you is that mainstream archaeology did not until Gobekli Tepe. Like for them, it was the other way around. This was the common concept that first you started with, you know, making your village or your town or whatever, and then you end up with the priestly class, and then you end up with the temple.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, but Gobekli Tepe is basically, because it's happening at the beginning of everything that sets civilization up.
Yeah, it's really like
They're saying
no,
like, well,
it shouldn't work that way, the way they're trying to make it out. Because if you think about just in modern times, like, did our current culture like precede the internet, or did the internet set off like this sort of new cultural development? It did. The technology of the internet started a whole new sort of cultural development amongst humans, amongst humanity. The same thing with the Industrial Revolution. It's like, yes, of course, we had culture, we had a civilization, all that kind of stuff before the Industrial Revolution. but it was that revolutionary technology or technological advancement that preceded a completely new type of culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in a way, it's like, okay, I guess you could make the argument in a general sense for both sides that you would have to have some type of foundation to support something that could build a temple, or it could just be like a savant, or some like
I think
ingenious group of people that get together and create something magnificent, and then that changes the entire culture.
yes.
That's
This is
kinda
why
what
I think this question is interesting, because I don't think it's an either or. It doesn't seem to me that it's that simple, and I think that's kind of what you're outlining here. Is that maybe if you drill it down to the most basic idea is what is it about the temple that would cause civilization to take place? Maybe it's that the temple is a structure that can't be moved. But that isn't necessarily true. Like, you can have a temple, you can have a specific tent that is the temple, or you can have many temples, small ones. They can be in caves, right? So there isn't necessarily, what is the concept of the temple that causes civilization to form around it? Is it that you have to have civilization to build one? This is the original idea of the archaeologists,
that's
right?
what I'm disagreeing. I'm thinking that that's less likely.
That it's less likely you require civilization to build one, or that
I mean, maybe
the impetus to create something like a temple becomes so strong that you invent civilization in order to be able to build it.
Okay, that's different. I hadn't thought of that, but I was thinking of more in terms of just like, maybe it would be a proto civilization or something. Obviously, because people point out, well, you have to have a workforce, and then you have to have division of labor, which means you have to have
Surplus.
a surplus.
Yeah.
So you have to, all that. I get that. So in a way you can that's what I'm saying. You can argue both sides. Like, you have to have some kind of system of affluence or surplus set up to where people can not focus on all of the other things that they need in life in order to devote their entire lives to some great work. Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Can that happen in a microcosm? Yeah. It doesn't have to be megalithic architecture. It could be something, something genius like, discovering how, like astronomy or measurement or something like that, or just a piece of art. It's like thinking about how much art has changed people and civilizations, and that doesn't necessarily require, I guess, at least for the artist, if he's going to do some great work, he needs to be supported in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Got to get paid.
yeah,
You got to eat.
yeah. So I understand the argument from that angle.
And it seems like we're talking about generational knowledge here to build this thing too, which is the other thing. You can't decide, well, I'm going to invent something that my great-great-great-grandchildren can build. And I'm going to start by messing with this grass.
Yeah.
Right? We've
Yeah,
gone through
we've
this
talked
before.
about
Let's
this,
take
yeah.
a break and we can come back to
All
talking
right.
about this. Yeah.
Cool. The watcher disagrees with everything we're saying.
Yeah,
here.
he does. He wants to talk about Renaissance temples.
We'll be right back. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, arguing about what we're talking about in the break. What came first? The temple or the sieve? I think a lot of this has to do with what is the definition of a temple?
Yeah. And what is the definition of civilization?
What is the definition of civilization? We don't know. So I keep thinking like
We don't even
like,
know if it was a temple. I'm just
I'm just saying a small group of people could have settled in an area that had abundant resources, and then an even smaller faction within that group could have been supported, and they could have been geniuses or artists and organized something and had this small local organization that did something profound, which inspired other people to continue that or whatever, right? Like, so like the idea that, I guess it's like, okay, when a civilization develops agriculture, is it really a civilization that develops agriculture, or is it like one person or a couple of people that actually develop it? And then people around them see what's happening and emulate it. So like, how do you say that the civilization developed it?
Yeah.
It's like, what civilization developed alternating current as a main mode of transmission of electrical power? It wasn't. It was a guy.
Yeah, and yes, and when you're talking
one
about
guy.
when you're talking about agriculture, it can be as simple as a group of, like you said, a group of people come into an area. It's very fertile, and up until this point, this group of people has basically been hunter gatherers, nomads. And they come into this area and they're like, wow, there's so much here that maybe we don't need to move. Or, eventually they sort of realize we don't need to move.
Yeah.
And just the fact of not moving results in people like, well, since I'm not leaving in 2 months, I'm actually going to build a stone wall here.
I'm going to start something that I can spend
And then
some time
somebody's
on.
like, well, there's lots of stuff here, but it would be great if I didn't have to walk all the way over there to get peaches from those trees. So they plant some seeds since they know that they're not leaving.
Yeah.
And it's worth planting some trees, and then somebody ends up with a couple of peach trees next to their hut. And then other people are like, wow, that's genius. That guy doesn't have to like walk way over there to where the wild ones are. And the next thing you know, you have orchards.
And then you take like the example of, what's his name? Coral Castle guy. And you just have some rando who's over there just like moving giant stones.
What is he doing?
And standing them up, just taking his time. He's just waiting on his peaches to grow.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to say is that I understand the argument when you look at something monumental like the entire site of Giza.
Yeah.
That yes, this took a massive organization of a workforce and all this kind of stuff, but it didn't have to start that way. When we look at, like Watcher was pointing out, like the Gothic temples and stuff like that, yes, those are later iterations of the temple, standing on the shoulders of giants over and over. The stories that are inscribed into them are obviously collections of a continuation of tradition to collect and protect these stories. That's not a good example of the first temple. Like, to me, the first temple is something outside of the box and monumental to the people that witness it. And just taking what was his name, Lead Skalnin or whatever from the Coral Castle guy, like Ed, that he was able to do that. Obviously, he had modern tech, from our modern era. But the point is, if you took somebody like that who had this ingenuity, and yes, they would have needed, like we were saying, some abundant place where they did have sustenance, or maybe they had a big family. Yeah. And their family was like, yeah, dude, make your art. You're good with building those moving giant stones. Do that. Like, let's build us a cave.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that could happen, and that could inspire other people to just take it to the next level and take it to the next level.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going with the point. But obviously, a site as big as like the Great Pyramid, or even, when you look at the entirety, or at least what we know of the entirety of Gobekli Tepe, that's far too big. That it would take.
It speaks of generations of work.
It speaks of generations. Yeah. Absolutely. And I would suggest one inspired the next, which inspired the next and caused like this meme
Yeah.
trend.
It's certain to
whatever.
be, yes, this is another thing. It's certain to be a complex situation. It isn't, you can't, although it is in some cases fruitful to discuss the basic ideas of like temple versus civilization first, it's going to be complicated,
Right.
you know. And there's going to be many reasons why things happen, you know, because you go from well, there's one savant in a family of people who are living in an area of abundance, and that family also is, say, wealthy in abundance, and they've got plenty of people who are doing things like inventing agriculture and making lots of food. And so this guy who wants to carve on rocks has time and food in order to carve on rocks. And the family says, yeah, man, go ahead. You're weird anyway. You know, we don't really want to be around you, so we're fine with you out there in those cliffs carving on rocks rather than being over here bothering us. But then for that to turn into a obviously massive undertaking that resulted, where everyone was like, yeah, we need lots of people carving on rocks, making giant stone circles. And then other people who were like, well, I've been looking at the stars, and I'd like you to carve some star stuff on these rocks. And I think those stars right there look like a bird, and those over there look like, and you see what I'm saying? And then you end up with, there's a lot of things incorporated in this that's more than just somebody invented right angles.
I agree with that. I don't mean to say specifically Gobekli Tepe could have started like this. What I'm talking about is the temple as a general concept.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just using Gobekli Tepe as an example, standing up giant stones and carving in them or whatever, that something like that could have taken place.
Absolutely. Yes.
But no, I agree with you that there's too much that we've learned, at least from this site, to be coincidental like that.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
It could be. It could be
completely. But aren't there correlations to even much older like paintings in caves and stuff that have also the same
Sweatman has
clusters of
yeah.
stars and symbols for those? Like, it does seem like this was a long-standing tradition already.
Yeah.
In terms of astronomy.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to the temple as concept rather than specifically Gobekli Tepe, then I think that people have been making sacred places out of natural places for forever, right? And so maybe the main difference we're talking about here is when it goes from the shaman or whatever, or the wise man finds a place in the wilderness with lots of beautiful ancient trees that look like columns and says, this is where we do our worship, of the Great Spirit.
Yeah.
And then maybe they move out of the woods and they get into the plains and they're like, well, there's no place with columns and cool trees.
Drag the rocks from 500 miles away.
Yeah. So there's a difference there, but I think, people have always found waterfalls or caves or beautiful places in the deep forest where they say this is a sacred spot.
And you make a good point about the shaman, and Graham talks about this a lot, but that is basically the situation of the one weird guy who's like artsy and does all this crazy cool stuff.
Yeah.
That even a small band of people is just like, yeah, you do your weird cool stuff.
Right.
Because it's inspiring to us, even though we don't really want to hang out with you.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll give you
we'll come and ask
the frog guts and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Here are the eyeballs from this frog I caught. I don't really want to talk to you, though. Unless I have some weird problem.
But you got to support that guy.
Yeah.
He invented Og's cookbook.
I'm going hunting. I need your blessing, but I don't want to talk to you. He invented Og's cookbook. Yeah.
It's genius. Only eat the left front leg and everything will be fine.
Yeah. Well, you know how he gives them the hunter's blessing, right? You drink the psychoactive brew with the eyeballs of the animal you want to hunt in it so that you can see through their eyes and find out where they go.
Oh my God. At first they feed them, like they make sure that they're eating in the garden.
Yeah.
Then they kill them and they take the bladder out, and that's the sacred brew.
Yeah, so But so going back to Gobekli Tepe and what it did to concepts from, mainstream archaeology and just history in general, I just find it really interesting. Like I said before, Ben has pointed out that they basically had to change the definition of what hunter-gatherer meant in order to say that Gobekli Tepe was basically built by hunter-gatherers. But the other thing that they changed was the initial concept that the temple followed the civilization, not the other way around. And so saying, the temple came first, I don't know this for sure, but it seems to me, I would make a presumption and say that it seems like Gobekli Tepe is so old that they would rather say that the temple came before the civilization because they don't want to define a civilization that far back in time. So those two things seem to go together. You redefine hunter-gatherers so you can call these people hunter-gatherers, and then you completely switch your idea about when the temple shows up in order to keep there from being a civilization right at the end of the Ice Age.
Okay, well, I'll play the devil's advocate. Brenner was complaining about saying they too much. So first of all, they are the archaeological establishment.
Yeah.
Like, essentially, archaeologists don't want to take Gobekli Tepe as evidence of a lost civilization.
That's right.
They'll scoff at that, but and say because what they want to say is that you can't claim that there was a lost civilization because there's no evidence for it.
Right.
Like, this is the big, I don't know, conundrum that we're in. Like, we'll say, well, this is evidence.
Yeah.
Of or at least possibly it's evidence that that something was lost.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they say, no, we've explained this.
Yeah.
Already, and so there's no evidence for your lost civilization.
Yeah. That's right.
And I think that's I don't know why it develops in that way specifically, but
like, this was also a thing with the Sphinx, right? I mean, they were like, well, show me the potsherds.
yeah, because they've already developed in their mind that that in order to show evidence of a civilization, you need 15-foot thick stacks of dirt full of pottery.
Yeah. It's right over there in Turkey. That's the point. So this is part of the problem, right? These things kind of connect. Now, these examples aren't specifically going through archaeologists' minds when they're coming up with these ideas, but one of the things that was said to discount the idea that the Sphinx is very old was that there's no evidence of a civilization that could have constructed it in the time period that Robert Schoch and John Anthony West were saying.
Right.
Right? I know you know.
Which was 12,000 years ago. Yeah, no.
Right.
Go ahead, say it.
And, the question was, where are the potsherds? Well, over there in Turkey, which isn't that far away. It's not that far. There is 15 feet of midden that was...
Or more, much more.
Just happened to be burying a giant megalithic construct, that showed excellent stonework.
Yeah, and giant stones that were quarried from a distance away.
So the question is could the people who were quarrying and moving and setting up and carving and sculpting, some of those sculptures on the T-pillars are beautiful, the three-dimensional ones, they're more than even, it's not just high relief, but it's actually some sculptures sticking out of them, right? It's amazing. Were people that were capable of doing that capable of making something like the Sphinx?
I'd just say absolutely.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but because I think it's a safer bet for the academic in archaeology to go out on a limb to fit a new discovery into the standard model than it is to go out on a limb and claim that a new discovery is evidence for something that is completely outside of it. So I think
agree.
that's what I'm playing the devil's advocate here. It's like they play the safe route, and it's like, yeah, okay, when we find that giant pile of potsherds that dates back to beyond 12,000 years, then we'll consider a lost civilization. And then they find it and they just fit it into the standard model and say there's still no evidence.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what happened. Now, whether it was done specifically to do that, I don't know, but it does seem deliberate. This is the idea that there was a civilization that advanced, and we're talking, and when I mean advanced, I just mean they had agriculture, they understood construction methods, they had logistics, they could move heavy loads, that kind of stuff. They don't have to have crystal spaceships to be advanced, right? So they were advanced, especially when you think that when the story beforehand has been everyone who lived during this period were basically primitive hunter-gatherers, right?
Yeah, and I want to get this timeline straight because I've on the Gobekli Tepe thing specifically about like when they think the agricultural aspects of it were taking place, when the grains were domesticated and the animals were domesticated and all that stuff. How does that fit into the timeline? Because what it seems to me like, what seems more possible to me is that the burying of the site was done by more like what Klaus Schmidt was describing as hunter-gatherer people that organized to do something.
Yeah. I'm trying to find some of these quotes in Magicians.
Now, it's kind of the same thing in the Americas, in North America with the mound builders. Because for so long they were considered, it's all hunter-gatherers. But in fact, there were like large cities here. Yeah. And they were building these giant earthen mounds, which is basically what the burying of the megalithic architecture at Gobekli Tepe is. They're giant earthen mounds over top of this megalithic core structure. But it was thought for a long time that the Native Americans were all just hunter-gatherers, but that's not the case. They actually had a very organized society in many cases. They had big cities. They had division of labor. And it was on just a massive scale. They were building these earthen constructions all over the place.
Right. And were those separate civilizations from... I mean, would you consider... I mean, why couldn't a group of people have both? That's the other question.
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah. Some people are just roamers, They want to roam.
That's right.
So, yeah, in the beginning of Magicians, I mean, right at the start, Graham asks Klaus Schmidt, at least quoting from the book, he asks him, how does it feel to be the man who discovered the temple that's rewriting history? That's the first question posed in the book. And he says, here we go. He says, Schmidt says, of course, we cannot say that Gobekli Tepe is a temple exactly. Let us call it a hill sanctuary. And I do not claim that it is rewriting history.
Yeah.
Rather, I would say that it is adding an important chapter to existing history. Wow. Yes, a chapter which had nothing in it before that, basically, I think. Okay, so he says, we thought that the transition from hunter-gatherers to farmers was a slow, step-by-step process, but now we realize that it was a period when exciting monuments that we didn't expect were made. And Graham says, not just monuments. At the beginning, the local people were hunter-gatherers, and there was no sign of agriculture. No, Schmidt concedes, none. But the people who came to Gobekli Tepe and who did all this work invented agriculture. So we see a connection between what happened here and the later emergence of Neolithic societies dependent on farming. So yeah,
So they're acting like this. I mean, are they saying that's the weird thing about it? They're like, okay, well, this is when it all happened. So that they think that there's this continuous transfer of that knowledge to like Sumer?
I don't know. He just
Or
says,
was it recreated in Sumer? So my point is that it seems to me like this has happened many times.
Yeah, I think maybe what he seems to be saying here, it's not clear. You know, he says we see a connection between what happened here and the later emergence of Neolithic societies dependent on farming. So maybe what he's saying is this is one of the first time that we've seen this take place, but it happened a bunch of times elsewhere in the world much later in time.
And they used to think it took a long, slow process, but actually they were like, wow, it actually happened real
happens
quick.
really quickly, yeah. So Graham asks him to elaborate on inventing agriculture, and Schmidt says, in this region we have the early domesticates, both animals and plants. It was done in this region, so they are the same people. And Graham says, so as far as you are concerned, this is the oldest agriculture in the world? And Schmidt says, yes, the first in the world. But yeah, this is the beginning of Magicians of the Gods. This whole conversation was fascinating. Graham's kind of probing him for, carefully, I think. He does say in here that he gets him annoyed a couple times, but he's probing him, and Schmidt was willing to talk to the guy, which is, I got to give him credit for that. There's another one. Graham says, all this, the megaliths, the iconography, the general conception, and the layout of the site. To be honest, this looks to be as big a project as a place like Stonehenge in England, yet Stonehenge is much younger. So how does what you found at Gobekli Tepe fit in with your notion of a hunter-gatherer society? And Schmidt says, it's much more organized than we expected. What we can see here are hunter-gatherers who obviously had a division of labor, because the work on the megaliths is specialist work, not for everyone. They were also able to transport these heavy stones and erect them, which means they must have had some engineering know-how. And again, we didn't expect that for hunter-gatherers. It's the first architecture, really, and it is architecture on a monumental scale.
So that's where the changing of the definition is really...
Yeah. Hunter-gatherers also do monumental architecture in their spare time. Yeah, and invent farming,
I mean, if you, this is what I'm trying to say.
Some hunter-gatherer had to invent farming.
That's what I'm saying. It's like you can look at both sides of the argument here. Yeah. It's like, well, if a hunter-gatherer society is basically that's always what's going to happen first. You're going to go grab stuff, the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Eventually, somebody's going to figure out a way to do it better, right? Like it's going to emerge from that type of situation. So yeah, eventually they'll invent megalithic architecture and agriculture, and probably I don't see why hunter-gatherers couldn't already be astronomers. Like you don't need division of labor to figure out the basics on astronomy, especially if you're outside all the time and you're traveling all the time and you're seeing the way their orientation changes in the sky and you're going past the same places and you have the same mountain peaks in the distance. And, to me, basic astronomy is going to come to somebody who's outside at night paying attention all the time, which would be, hunter-gatherers are going to be outside at night paying attention.
Yeah, so
you just start to recognize patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, the first thing you should notice if you're paying attention is that it's full of patterns, and then that should, if you're really interested, make you always look for patterns, right? Yeah. Because it's, anyone should notice there's a day-night cycle, right? And you're like, wow, there seems to be a pattern here, right?
Yes, that's the very first, most obvious one. Yeah. So yeah,
but a lot of I know it's goofy to say it, but it is a very obvious pattern. But the question is how long does it take somebody to say, is it really a pattern, and start checking things?
Yeah, I was thinking about it more in remember when we were traveling in the Southwest and there were multiple places we went where in the distance there would be some little notch in the hills.
Yeah.
And it's like where this hilltop was, that notch, like the sun would set in there on the equinox or something. You know,
Yeah.
there's always some interesting
That's
like
what
that.
I'm saying. That's the
It's like
pattern
that-
guy.
Yeah, he's just like, hey, you know, like the last time we were here, the sun was setting in that notch. And then we came and now it's setting over there
Yeah.
up by the peak.
Right.
And then they pay attention to it long enough. It's like, oh, it's setting in the notch again. And we came here right after the snows thawed or something. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's like you start to, I can understand how, especially with oral tradition, you can pass down loose measurements of astronomy.
Yeah.
And then it only takes somebody to really say, well, you know what? We're going to look at the sunset from this giant boulder at that notch every time we come here,
Yeah.
and start to really hone in on the details.
Yeah. Well, with what you're talking about, it's a little more advanced than that. Somebody has already done that part, and they're like, okay, so there's a notch out there. What I want to do is build a place in the right spot to where the sun sets in that notch at this time of year.
Exactly. That's
Right.
what comes later.
Yeah, that's what comes later. Yeah. So that shows advanced understanding of patterns already.
Like your
But
point about
someone has to sit on a boulder and watch a bunch of notches and also pay attention to the seasons and eventually figure out, okay, the sun goes from here to there and back. And it does this across the seasons
yeah.
every time. And I've watched this several years now, and like it's over there, and then it goes all the way across, and it's over there, and then it goes all the way back across, and you can basically time the seasons based on this. It would be rough, but they would start to learn like when it's at this spot. And there's a little not, you know.
So it doesn't take any precision measurement
Right.
to realize that like there are these patterns that go back and forth.
Yeah.
But to decide like the specific time when it always goes in the one spot that's very
Yeah.
accurate, and then like, you know, now count days to that point again,
Yeah.
and then yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and
so
they're
that
like-
can start with the natural formations, like you were saying, like the shaman is over there, they're in the mountains, and there's these giant spires of rock, and then they go in the valley, and then
Yeah.
like drag the rocks over here.
God, that 0.24 must have driven them nuts, dude. You're drawing lines in the dirt, counting the days, and you're just like, it never adds up. It doesn't work. Right?
It did back then, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was 360 every time.
Yeah, megalithic architecture, I think, is a different story.
Yeah. And the other question, of course, we're going through astronomy here, is are they displaying understanding, at least of some kind of precession in the carvings in Gobekli Tepe? And
Yeah.
so that's because that's the next, you know, so you can say, well, yeah, you recognize day and night. And then eventually you're like, well, let's pay attention to the little silver thing up there too. And then they start to figure out the moon is doing stuff, right? And it's got its own patterns that you will come to recognize. Shouldn't take too long. And then you'll recognize the sun drifting back and forth and the correlation to the seasons. Maybe you'll start to understand equinoxes and solstices, you know, and maybe you can narrow those down to like single days to get that accurate or whatever. And you know where to stand to time that out, to figure out what's happening. But when do you start figuring out that the stars are very slowly drifting backwards
Yeah,
across?
see, that seems like a generational thing to me.
Yeah.
It's like, my father's father's father
Yeah.
stood here when the sun set right there, and blah, blah, blah. And the star that went with it was this one.
Yeah.
And no, now it's different.
Right.
Like, that star
It's
is now
moved.
moved way over and
Yeah.
not going down in the notch
Right.
after the sun, or rising up through the notch before the sun, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. The first thing that happened
Now
is
the sun's coming up before the star.
someone had to notice that something was off after having been interested in astronomy for their entire life. Something like that, right? Like what you're saying, he's being shown as a child when he's 5 or 6 years old about that star being right there when the sun rises in the notch or something.
Yeah.
And then he's out there as a 70-year-old man, and he's like, it's not in the right spot.
Yeah, if they had named the star and it always rose right before the sun on the equinox through this notch,
Yeah.
and then 3 or 4 generations later it was coming up after the sun,
Yeah.
they'd be like,
Yeah.
well, it used to.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you what's going on, but it does give you an indication that something much slower is happening
Yeah.
and changing. But again, going back to the impetus for building a temple, and as Randall has pointed out many times, tempo, like this is something, the connection to that word.
Yeah.
It's temporal. It's about time, whether it's to stand throughout time or to measure time or something like that. I think that's a great connection. But your point about so you're as a hunter-gatherer civil or society, you're moving through these sites and you pick certain sites because at certain times of year, and you always recognize the stars and the suns and setting and rising patterns. And eventually they hone in on like specific moments that are critical in the changing of the seasons. And then somebody says, let's build something here.
Yeah.
And then they start doing more precise measurements, and then they build the temple.
Yeah.
At the site that's on the solstice or whatever. Yeah. So
exactly. It seems to me like the most, Adam's calendar is like this. There's a site way out in the desert. I don't remember what it's called. Maybe that is Adam's calendar. But basically you can see how it gets started with the guy who's paying attention eventually sees that he's really trying to figure out, is that really in the same, 'cause you know how it is. If you're watching a star in the sky and you're just looking at it, it looks like, is it moving around?
Yeah.
Right. So maybe what this guy does is he goes and he gets himself a couple of sticks and he stands 2 sticks up in the ground and then he watches that star from behind those 2 sticks, or he's got the rock that he sits on and then there's 2 sticks. And so he's like, okay, I've got this straight line and now I can sit here in this spot with this straight line in front of me. And that's the beginning of what ends up with, massive.
The old stick trick.
Yeah, the old stick trick. And so does that eventually turn into, let's build something monumental? But of course, the stick trick doesn't automatically turn into moving giant stones. And, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that has to be developed aside from that, but maybe this guy has replaced his sticks with a couple of pointed rocks.
Yeah, but I think
and then a stone carver's walking by one day and he's like, you know what? I could make some awesome ones for you, buddy.
Yeah. That's not really a pointed rock. But I think too that our modern education about the cosmos, I'm not saying it's bad. It's great that we have all this knowledge built up about the stars and, the cosmos and whatever. We've gained a lot of understanding as a civilization, which is great. But I think that we can't understand the awe at which that more ancient people may have experienced when looking at the cosmos. Oh my God, rookie move.
Wow.
Old GMA's calling me and the ringer's on. Rare event. A rare event. GMA doesn't call me during the podcast too often. But so I guess, I don't know, I kind of have like this glimpse of like,
I understand.
when you're
erase all that knowledge and then you're
erase
looking
all
at
that
this
knowledge
stuff.
and you're just in this place.
Yeah.
This beautiful wilderness land, and you're roaming around and there's just all the, and whatever your culture may think about all that. But of course, then there's just this grand mystery,
Yeah.
which is the heavens.
Yeah.
And so the impetus for building something lasting to dedicate to this great mystery and to maybe measure it or to mark something that was discovered about it. Like if somebody came to you and said, if we go to this spot again at this time, we will see the sun do the same thing. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
No way.
You
Like,
can't
it's gonna
predict
be-
the gods.
You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so I think that could be a major influence on
Yeah.
on the desire to do something monumental, to say, okay, let's drag all these giant stones over here and stand them up for all time.
Yeah.
It's like a dedication to this gigantic mystery up there. It's
Yeah. Well, and if you are and we need to take another break. But,
Yeah.
And the Watchers made some points that I want to get to when we come back from the break. But real quick, if you're a pattern recognizer, right? If you're that guy who's the guy who's seeing patterns in the movements of stuff in the sky, and you do like what you said is erase all of our modern understanding about what all those things are up in the sky, and you're seeing patterns, and you learn that those patterns correlate with patterns here, and that they can be useful patterns.
yeah.
Right.
They have utility.
Then you might start thinking, you can see how they're, and this may be too simple, but you can see how the connection between the as above, so below idea shows up, and then also that maybe these are somehow related to spirits or gods, and that understanding what's happening up there helps your understanding of what's going on down here, because you already have seen a correlation between the two. Mm-hmm. Right. And so then you can see how suddenly these circle of giant stones is not just an observatory, but also is temple-like, because now you're
making a connection
to
like
the heavens and the gods and
Yes.
the spirits, however you want to say it. The
Yeah, so
ancestors,
you're
whichever way you
dedicating
would
it
look
to
at
the gods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Let's take a break.
Take a break.
Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We have the Institute for Advanced Coprolite Studies here. I think that's where we're actually working our way through some of this ignorance, the certificates of ignorance that you have to print yourselves. We're displaying it right now. This is the discussion about how we don't understand these processes, and it's always good to talk through them.
Yeah.
And yeah, during the break, the Watcher was talking about how we're going out in the weeds and cutting them down. And yeah, I think that's how you have to start agriculture, right? That's basically what happened. But I do want to, well, let's go ahead and start with some of the stuff that the Watcher was saying before, that I was saying we'd get to this after the break. So he said this assumes that this knowledge doesn't come from a period like the time shortly after Eden, which can be taken, I took it as a reference to, some previous civilization, some golden age. And that's possible when you're specifically talking about Gobekli Tepe, and Graham has implied that maybe this is a legacy, that somebody from an advanced civilization was teaching these people these processes, these sciences, this engineering, that it was a school of a kind. But that kicks the can down the road in the question of temple versus civilization. What comes first? How does this really start? Because somewhere it has to start, right? So if Gobekli Tepe is a result of people from an advanced civilization that was basically destroyed during the end of the last ice age, that came out of that destruction with knowledge from their advanced civilization, and then had major influence on a hunter-gatherer civilization, a hunter-gatherer society, the question still remains: how did they get started?
Right. Yeah, and just with the Eden story, I mean, we've talked about the possibility that the characters in the story of Adam and Eve are civilizations themselves. Now, we talked about it specifically with the Epic of Gilgamesh, but I mean, it's the same deal. It's like this, two civilizations rise together or something, or a civilization rises together and they gain knowledge, and then they have a fall.
Yeah.
They fall out of the golden age. They go through an apocalypse. Well, then they have, they're the progenitors of following civilizations that war amongst each other and
Yeah.
whatever. It's just a whole. It could be
Yeah.
that's just that they're placeholders for civilizations themselves.
Yeah. And then the question is the Eden a symbol for a time of plenty, like really good climate when the earth was full of life and things were relatively easy? Or is it a symbol for advancement, where, because the idea, like, because both things can, if they end, whether it's an advanced civilization with lots of things that make life easier, or a world with a climate that makes life easier.
Yeah.
Either one of those things ending results in basically getting kicked out of Eden.
Yeah, and it's maybe, it's interesting symbolism that, the part of the story of their fall from Eden has to do with this flaming sword.
Yeah.
And then they're scraping for life in the
Yeah.
barren land,
Yeah.
the wasteland.
Yeah.
But anyway, to the main point, it's kicking the can down the road. Like, if you're going to say that it was that the knowledge came from some previous, and that was my original point, that in most cases in recorded history, the temple does precede the civilization because it was an ancient source of knowledge.
Right.
That's what that was my point. Not
Okay,
not the very first temple,
Yeah.
but in most civilizations, the temple does precede them because there was something before.
Yeah. Because the temple is the legacy of
The
something
temple is the
before.
legacy of the people before.
Right.
And in many cases, it's an actual temple too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not just metaphorical or symbolic.
Well, and then the another possibility is the custodians. This is the other question: is there a third party?
That's kicking the can way down
Right.
the road.
Who built their temple first? Yeah. But that's even then, maybe that's off-worlding the question, but still, is it possible that this has never really been just about what humans are doing and they're just studying the stars and like that's the other thing. You have to bring the spirituality into it. The entire paranormal realm is involved.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say next is not necessarily just aliens, but
That's what I mean. Yeah.
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 Like, I know that, custodians is Bramley's term for some kind of alien overlord group, but I just mean whoever's really calling the shots.
Right.
Right. And they may be non-human. Now that's like way out of conspiracy territory, but it's still, it's very interesting, and we see it's still happening. Mm-hmm. Now the stuff that's happening now is it's so difficult to untangle from all the government and intelligence agency stuff that's happening, but still there seems to be phenomena taking place that doesn't have anything to do with those people.
And the ancient texts, right? Like
Yeah.
people explain their modern encounters using the symbolism of the ancient texts,
Yeah.
right? Like, so if you're of one religion or another and you have this strange spiritual encounter, well, you're going to just fit it into however it fits into your religion
Yeah.
or your religious beliefs, which they themselves may have come about because of the same types of encounters, but it's
Right.
it's grown its own definitions.
Yes.
The religions have developed like a whole, like, well, this is how we explain everything.
Yeah.
And so then you just fit it into that model. It's
Right. And so if the same stuff is happening now, and it's just happening with science, right? It's science is the new religion, and it's doing the same thing to these exact same kinds of encounters, right? This is where the whole alien story comes from. This is the scientific explanation for the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a major simplification, obviously, but it just basically goes with what you were saying. You know, when your worldview was a religious one, then any kind of anomalous thing would be fit into your worldview using that framework.
Right.
When your worldview is a scientific one, anomalous things get fit into your worldview using that framework.
Right.
And when they're really anomalous, science has a hard time dealing with them. And so a lot of times science is just like, that isn't real.
Yeah.
You know, whereas religions, maybe they had an easier time explaining these things.
Incorporating
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes just saying, well, that's clearly demons and we should set you on fire.
That's right. Just burn it down.
That's right.
Huh.
But yeah, I know it's a kicking the can down the road, but it is worth asking the question, like, how much influence has there been?
But I don't have a problem
maybe people would want me to say, has there been influence?
I don't have a problem kicking the can down the road, though. I mean, this is why I was reading, like, over the past few months, these stories that were popping up, like, so, you know, however many, like 3 million years ago or whatever, some guys were building canoes and going across, you know, they weren't even humans.
Yeah.
Like, how long has this been going on? I mean, you could easily find a period of time like ours 3 million years ago amongst people that were not humans.
Yeah.
And it can be completely gone now.
Yeah.
So it's just, to me, this is the idea that this is the first time is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous assumption. It should be, everybody should be, or like at least science should be completely open to the possibility that this has happened before.
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree with that.
So to ridicule those who are suggesting that certain things are evidence that it did happen before is ridiculous. Like, so I don't, but going back to what I was trying to get to is that it's not necessarily important to me personally to find out when was the actual first one, because I think they happen multiple times, and so many times there can be one that is not necessarily influenced by a precursor directly, right? Like agriculture could be developed in multiple different places in the world at multiple different times without like a body of knowledge being passed on by a previous advanced civilization. Doesn't have to be the first time it happened.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with the agriculture thing. I mean, domestication of plants is one thing. But learning to plant things that you go looking for in the forest near your house, or, you know, learning to find those things in the forest and then plant some near your house so you don't have to constantly go looking in the forest for them, or so that you have some that are just right close by. Does that count as agriculture? I guess, you know. If you're like, well, we're always going out there and hunting these things down. What if we
brought their seeds
and plant a bunch nearby?
Yeah, that's ag.
Yeah. But to turn grasses that you can't eat into bread by I don't know how you would do it, but hybridization and
essentially
long-term,
that
genetic manipulation.
That to me is something that definitely takes.
How do you even know you can do that?
Well, I think if you had, like our civilization, we have records. We've been farming for a long time.
Yeah.
And scientific records and people studying, agriculture and botany and biology, all this kind of stuff. And of course you figure out, we can hybridize these things and make them and get, that's what I'm saying. Like, did that arise initially? I doubt it. I think more likely that it started like you're saying, you're just collecting seeds and.
Yeah.
But now,
But
hybridization.
specifically what happened, specifically what happened in the area around Gobekli Tepe was domestication of grasses into like wheats.
Yeah, I don't know much about that.
That's just crazy. That's one of the things that I have a hard time, just sitting down and saying, okay, start with dumb hunter-gatherer guy and like go from there and say, okay, I can see how this guy who doesn't know anything, doesn't have any science or whatever, can look at the sky, see patterns, and maybe become an astronomer. I can see how this guy can see peach trees or whatever, stuff in the forest that he wants to have, and then say, it would be great if they were close by and plant them here. But how does he look at something that he's never eaten and doesn't taste good and you can't do anything with and say, I can turn that into food? That's a fun thing to think about
So I'm gonna throw this out there. If they had animal husbandry, right? Like they were working on, like they were domesticating livestock, for example, goats, sheep and stuff. And then the sheep go out into the field and eat only one type of grass first. And so then the grass that is produced after that is much different, right? Like then in other words, that's one way to weed out the type of stuff you don't want.
Yep.
Or if you, and I don't know how viable seeds are after they go through the animals, but I was just thinking like you could have animals that are going to eat the biggest, most
the juiciest,
like the juiciest of them, and then of course their feces is fertilizer, and then maybe has seeds in it of that specific plant.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you can turn an entire field into that plant.
Yeah.
By way of using these animals as the things that are going out and picking the specific ones out.
Yeah.
And making them reproduce. I don't know. So it could be a byproduct of like taking care of animals.
Could be, yeah.
Right? That
Well,
they just so happen to end up with these grains that were actually much better than just the random wild grasses.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I could see that. That's what I'm saying. It had to happen at some point.
Yeah, and I was going to point out about hybridization too. Like with trees, I mean, way easier. Right? You find a limb from a tree that you really want, and you just stick it in a hole in a tree that you don't care about. Turn it into that tree. Way easier.
Yeah, I know it's possible because it happened. Like we've had this discussion before as well.
I'm just coming up with ideas here.
Yeah. It seems like this would have taken planning and some kind of understanding that it was something you wanted to do.
I agree with that.
Because it seems like,
but of course that has a development process.
Yeah.
So you recognize things like hybridization over time with certain plants, and then it takes this organized, like, well, let's try this on this other plant.
Right. I would say that if there was a simplest explanation, would be that the people who cultivated grasses from something that is basically not good for human consumption into something that is good for human consumption came from somewhere where there were grasses that were good for human consumption. And they recognized a similarity, and they just said, well, this is kind of what we used to have over in that other place that's now on fire or frozen or whatever it is the problem with the place that they left. And they said, maybe we can turn these into those if we cultivate them. And instead of having these little tiny seed pods on the native grasses, you end up with giant ones that you can turn into wheat because they recognized it from something they knew before where it grew that way naturally.
Right, yeah.
That would be one way. Still, it's just it's just interesting that, you know, you end up with a group of people who become so enterprising. You know, they show up in one place and they just invent everything that's necessary for civilization all at once. You know, not all at once, obviously. It took them a long time, probably. This is the other interesting thing about Gobekli Tepe is...
Weren't they there for like 1,000 years or something?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. How long were they there? We don't know.
Oh, we don't.
No. I'm pretty sure that the dating is based on materials they found in the stuff that buried the site. So that tells you the end of the usage, not the beginning.
Yeah, at least not the beginning of the megalithic site.
Yeah.
But if they can correlate the burying of it with the farming,
Yeah.
I just don't know. That's what I was saying earlier. Is
These
that
are things
these
that
are the things I
hopefully we
wanted to
will
look at. I mean, I need to learn more about this timeline.
Yeah.
Because I do remember hearing I would think one thing and then I would hear something again from maybe, you know, another book or what, and be like, wait, what? I thought that was, you know, so I obviously don't have the timeline straight in my head in terms of the archaeological discoveries.
Yeah.
And
I'm
how
hoping to
how
learn a
they
lot
piece
more
it
about
together.
this in the museums there and from the guides and talking to the archaeologists over there for sure. Because I would like to have all these details too, because all that stuff is important, especially when you're trying to figure out how did this happen.
Yeah. It seems like I mean, I just feel like working with the land just as long as I have and learning from obviously other farmers and people that we've been associated with since we started this project in 2016 out at the vineyard. You do start to recognize patterns when you're dealing with these plants constantly. And I feel like it would be even hunter-gatherers would recognize all these growth patterns and certain types of things, and they would know like different species, of course, and then they would notice hybridization between species, and they would see all these types of things that you could do with plants. They would already have probably a pretty incredible body of knowledge, even if it was oral tradition, about the plants. Now, whether or not they implemented that in a large scale, that's something else.
Yeah.
Right. That's a whole nother set of tools and ideas that don't necessarily have to come. And obviously it has not come with many hunter-gatherer societies for long periods of time.
Yeah.
They never did it.
Well, and you know, again, so to bring this back to, was some of this knowledge implanted is, you know, again, I think of the explanation for things like, how did you come up with ayahuasca, which is,
Yeah, that was a weird one.
yeah, but the explanation is that the plants taught them, right? This is the idea that there is some kind of communication taking place with something other than human that results in knowledge that you wouldn't normally come by through trial and error.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of more prosaic explanations for all of this
Right,
stuff.
but
if
so if this outlier case demonstrates that something can teach people, that there's a source of knowledge that doesn't have anything to do with trial and error, it doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with science. I mean, maybe it is scientific in a way that we don't understand yet, but it's basically saying, here's an effect that you don't know exists, that you can achieve by using these two things that you would never use otherwise, right? And then if you can achieve that effect, it will have a massive effect on your mind, and if it happens to enough people in your society, it will have a very interesting effect on your entire culture, right? This is not a minor thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the same with these grasses, is what I'm saying. The grasses, being able to make bread out of native grasses is a big deal, right? This is a huge agricultural thing, and maybe you just don't know that that's possible, except maybe you have some weird guy who talks to plants. or is in touch with the
I'm not laughing at you, but the
I know.
seriousness in your face just made me laugh.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you on that.
Talks to plants, or however you would put it, is in touch with the ancestor spirits, is in contact with the Akashic records, however you want to say. But that there's a source of knowledge that is outside of our current scientific model's understanding, that some humans, the savants, like you were saying, the shamans, the weird guys, have been in contact with all the way back to those dudes 3 million years ago making canoes. And maybe further. Something is, in other words, that there's more to the world than just like, messing around with grass till you can make bread. That something is actually telling you, hey, you can do this.
Yeah.
In some cases, to some people who have that contact. And that just makes the whole story totally different.
Yeah, it does.
And if that's the case, and I am inclined to think that this is taking place, even if it's very rare, I am inclined to think, this is another thing I reference, Ships by, what's his name? Gordon White. He talks about this a lot, that basically there's a connection to the spirit realm that has been talking to people for a long time. And that there's a kind of cooperation of some kind between life on this planet and the realm of spirits, whatever that means, and that these things are totally intertwined, and this results in seemingly impossible advances like turning grasses into bread or coming up with ayahuasca. And all I'm saying is if that one outlier case is true, and that's the reason why people have this brew is because they were told it by some non-human intelligence, then that just makes the questions of what comes first, temple and the civilization, all this stuff, it becomes totally different. Instead of sitting here figuring out how can this happen by chance or by people just...
You're kicking the can through the portal.
Right. Yeah, the can doesn't even exist. The can...
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's what I meant. That's what I meant with the custodian's
but
question.
It's like
is there something, a third party?
But that story can't go back. You can't kick that can back forever either, right? Like eventually you get to a point like, okay, so let's say...
But how far can you kick it
Well, this
back?
is what I'm saying. Let's say this spirit realm exists and there's all this intelligence about all this life in the universe and what these specific life forms could do to advance themselves. If we go back to the standard model of, say, evolution, and then go back far enough where there is no advanced intelligent life that we know of.
Yeah.
Like what is the state of that intelligent spirit world, and how are they, like, why didn't they give fire to bacteria?
Yeah.
And shit. Or
Yeah, that
maybe bacteria is too small.
Yeah, you're right. No, you're right.
But you know what I'm saying?
Give it to termites.
Give it to termites.
Termites would take over the world if they had fire.
Why didn't they just pick termites?
Right. Yes, that is
Termites were already builders.
Well, they were talking to somebody somewhere else. I mean, that's
on
one
a different planet.
Yeah,
But yeah, again,
I know. That's
where did they get the information? Right? Like, is
What,
this
the
their
spirit realm?
Is this their second universe?
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Yeah, maybe they're not trying to give us fire. They're just trying to have better communication. And that's the whole point of everything.
This is why I like the idea that, and this definitely doesn't explain anything either, but I like the idea that, like, our interaction with the universe, all of our senses and everything that is going, into our nervous system and going into our brain and being translated into these concepts that we have, that translation into concepts is actually not happening locally.
Right. That's non-local. Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Yep.
And so that whatever that non-local thing is the collection of the data,
Yeah.
which can come back far in the future or to other beings elsewhere.
Yeah.
in whatever form. I think that's really cool. And
Yeah.
so that the collection of data started with the first life forms, perhaps, that had senses to sense the world.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool idea.
It is a great idea. And I mean, it could even,
And so
the collection of data could even start with just
energy or
yeah, matter doing things.
But
It's already making computations, you know.
right,
as,
but the
as Feynman would
bandwidth is
say.
like really
yeah.
low,
Right.
And then as
was
the
dial up.
as the entities get like higher and higher bandwidth, like more senses,
Yeah.
and all these, then the bandwidth gets better.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
translation of information gets
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, material doing stuff like matter doing things isn't sensing necessarily. Well, maybe it is. It is in a sense it's sensing because any energy interacting with it is causing different stuff to happen. So computations are taking place, right?
Yeah.
Basic computations, which is data. But then when you have life forms, that's taking in data from material and then turning it into abstract concepts. And
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
much
yeah.
higher level of interaction.
And it's a combination of a broad frequency range of energy.
Yeah,
Right. Like
yeah.
our ears, eyes, touch,
Yeah.
smell. It's like all these different.
Right.
It's the bandwidth is
so,
huge.
So the spirits are over there like, okay, now that we've got a universe where things can be on fire, we need to come up with creatures that can see and feel the fire and think about the fire
That's right. Yeah,
and hear the fire.
They were they were getting all this data from light, and they were like, okay, we need to make eyes, and then they eventually got to flies, and they were like, more eyes is not helping.
yeah.
It's still not.
It's mostly made of eyes, and this is not what we want.
All right, forget them. Move on to the next thing, and now
I mean,
we're stuck with.
there's lots of them, and they're mostly made of eyes, but we're not quite there
You
yet.
can blame the spirit realm for flies. They went in a bad direction for a while. They abandoned it, and we are now stuck with them.
The simulation thing also is a great can kicking exercise, right? If you say, well, you can explain the entire universe.
That's such a boring can kick.
I know, but
Let's hear what you got to say.
it is interesting if you say, well, our universe is weird because it's really a simulation and it has issues and it's not perfect or whatever. But it's still just interesting to say, okay, well, if something is simulating it, and I know not everyone thinks of the simulation hypothesis this way, but a simulation implies, it seems to me
Like
that
implies
it
intelligence.
implies something has caused the simulation to take place.
Intelligent design.
Yeah,
They don't want to say it.
maybe right.
Simulation is the new intelligent design.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe I just don't think about. I haven't considered it deeply enough, but to me, it seems like the simulation is basically saying, well, we can compare this whole thing to a kind of virtual reality, sort of an immersive environment that isn't real. In other words, it is itself encompassed within a greater environment that is real, and it's simulating something.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I take it. I know
Yeah,
not
I-
everybody takes it that way.
Okay.
You can't, I used to say that the idea that the universe is basically constructed of pure information. This is another simulation concept. It doesn't imply that there is a wider universe out there within which this one is taking place. But that really our
But
universe
this is a manifestation of some
Yeah.
other form of
Yes. Yeah.
of reality.
Right.
That's not planets and stars and just
Yeah, and it is interesting that you do see occasionally, not just occasionally, but you do see this idea that this place that we're in, that we all interact with on a regular basis, is the illusion. And that to me seems like it could be an ancient way of saying that this is the simulation,
yeah.
that this realm we live in is the illusion, right? Now you can take it philosophically and say, well, the illusion they meant was all the stuff that you get wrapped up in with your life. That you have all these material cares and all this, that's all illusory, and what
Yeah,
really counts is like your spiritual growth, whatever.
But also in a way you could say that the illusion I mean, the idea that this is all an illusion is scientific in a way, or at least it's proven in a way by science, scientific discoveries, in that like this is definitely like our perception of the world and like the materials and all of their attributes and all this kind of stuff is all like the macro. And yet they're telling us now that no, there's this whole other realm of the physical world that is everything acts completely differently.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff on this hierarchy up here where we are is just a manifestation of these mysterious interactions of this whole other world of stuff in the quantum.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it's like an epiphenomena, like an emergent.
In other words, we are not really seeing the way things really are.
Yeah.
You can't. You have to get down into this quantum level to actually see what's really going on.
Yeah.
This is all
Emergent.
emergent from
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
On a higher,
And the
like
fact
way
that,
up the hierarchy.
right. And the fact that the emergence results in something that has seemingly totally different rules is what makes
Yeah.
it illusory. Yeah.
And that's very much like a simulation,
Yeah.
right? Like the simulated world operates on very different rules than the real
Yeah.
universe or the actual reality. So, I mean, you could take it that way.
Yes. That's a great, yeah. Okay, good. You've added a third or fourth way to look at the simulated universe that I like. Cool. All right, well, we've gone long. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and do the beginning of the show.
All right. Yeah, that's right. Back to grass.
Yeah.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, for the final segment of this rando podcast, Brothers of the Serpent. And yeah, this is the intro.
Yeah.
So, how's it been going, man?
Oh, it's been going great. I moved around a lot of pallets today.
Russ has been labeling wine in a tiny space. It's completely full of everything that we have in the wineries.
I had two choices: sit around and wait for Kyle, or start moving things around. And I decided,
I
well,
can't believe you moved those pallets by yourself. Those are heavy.
I
the
could
glass
not-
is heavy.
Yeah.
Itself.
Yeah.
They're real thick glass bottles, and then when they're full of wine and they're double stacked, oh my god.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to move.
I was like, he did it somehow. Surely I can do this.
Dude, I have moved them, but most of the time I call like somebody and have them come and help me push them around because it's too much.
Yeah, I didn't want you to come back and be like, you haven't done anything?
Can't move them. Oh. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, so instead what happened is he comes back and he's like, did you move those, you
those?
idiot?
Jeez. You were like, I can't move anymore.
Right. Yeah, I was like, I did, and now I can't put them back. I'm too tired.
But yeah, in order to rearrange, it's basically you have to empty it out. Russ had to take all these pallets out and put them in a different building so that we can actually rearrange stuff and start restocking the building properly. That's going to make more sense moving forward. But it's so packed.
The building is packed, and we have multiple stacks of pallets full of wine bottles in cases that need to be labeled, which means I have to get the cases out, take the bottles out, and run them across the,
that's crazy.
put the labels on, and then put them back in
That
the
was
cases.
my fault.
No, the point is that because the building is so packed, there's no extra room, and so to actually continue this process, we had to actually take everything out of the building. Now that I've gotten 2 stacks of pallets labeled, we had to take everything out because those need to go in the back.
They were the ones in the front.
Yeah.
So
Anyway, I'm sure that's really interesting to all of you out
that's
there.
real interesting.
Yeah.
But we're about to go out of town, so it's like getting everything set up for.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know. This is one thing I've grown to loathe. Is like the couple of weeks before we leave for a long time are always really stressful. I mean, I'm not complaining, folks. Like I'm actually I feel very blessed and lucky to be able to do these adventures.
Complaining.
I'm trying to not complain.
Yeah.
I need to. You feel like
We did
all
this.
These, all these obligations, and it's like I don't want to leave people that are counting on me like screwed, right? I want to get them all set up to where everything's going to be good.
Yeah.
And it's kind of stressful.
Yeah.
But
we did the
I'll
same
get over
thing.
it.
We did the same thing when we took off for Egypt. We had a bunch of stuff we had to prepare.
Yeah.
So
I'll get over it.
yeah.
Something I got to get used to, I hope.
Yeah. Well, when we came back from Egypt, you're like, let's quit.
I know. I know. I was just like, this is all I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, we should not-
I never want to go back. Talk about, just forget that job.
We are working on a video.
We are.
Who knows? We got a pretty decent script written.
Yeah.
So, but it's again, this is another little kind of like once a week thing we get to do. Just get together, work on the script.
Yeah.
Eventually, we'll be putting something together, and I'm really think it's going to be good.
Yeah.
So hopefully, we can get that done pretty soon.
Yeah, I'd like to get it done before we leave, which I don't know if that's going to happen.
Now I'm really stressed. All right, let's get on. We got emails. I don't have any news stories. We got producers. Let's go.
Yeah. Space Weather News from spaceweather.com. CME impact. A CME just hit Earth's magnetic field on March 15th, sparking a G1 class geomagnetic storm. Currently, conditions favor the development of even stronger G2 class storms in the hours ahead. So high latitude skywatchers should be alert for auroras. And there are far-side sunspots. The source of yesterday's far-side CME is a mystery, but there are two leading suspects. Helioseismic maps reveal a pair of large active regions on the far side of the sun. Both of these will rotate around to the Earth side of the sun within a week, potentially bringing potent sunspots into our planet's strike zone. In the meantime, we will keep an eye out for CMEs flying over the edge of the sun, indicating additional far-side activity. Current conditions, solar wind speed is pretty high, 557.2 kilometers per second, and the density is very high, 28.89 protons per cubic centimeter. I think that's one of the highest that I can recall. That's very high. Sunspot number is 97.
I did think it was feeling kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We're convinced here at Brothers of the Serpent that you can tell the proton density by the weirdness of the feeling in the day.
Yes. Yep.
Neutron count today is 0.5% above the space age average. And the KP index is 3.67, which is still quiet, but the 24-hour max was 4, which is unsettled. And that is your Space Weather News for the week. Thanks to Space Weather.
Bitcoin is going up, folks.
It has been climbing.
So the crypto market is basically recovering.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. There's financial stuff happening, so people are buying crypto for some reason. Okay, so BTC 24,892.92, and ETH is 1,710.77.
Thank you. All right, so I got one little thing to report on. The old Pocket Ref, which I think this was a gift from someone in the Snake Forest to us. And, this is really funny, but Laura's been plowing through all these books, Graham Hancock's books and stuff. And she hasn't received her next book in the mail yet, but she finished Magicians.
What is it?
I think I told her to get the Immortality Key.
Oh, okay.
I was just like, dude.
I told her to get Passport.
I was like, go to Immortality Key, because that I know where her her interests with her friends and their discussions are.
Yeah.
And I was like, you should definitely read that book.
Yeah.
And I think it's But anyway, she's waiting on her other book. She finds this.
She started
in the
reading
Snake
Pocket
Bros
Ref.
box.
Oh, no.
This Snake Bros box, and she's like, "What is this?" And so, look, that's her bookmark.
Wow.
She's been going through this whole thing. I mean, I don't know if she's reading.
She's not reading all the
she's just
tables,
checking
right?
it.
Yeah.
She's just checking it all. But she came to me the other day and was like, "What is the deal here? Elevation versus air and water." And this is interesting. So it gives you the elevation tables, so you can go, at sea level, below sea level, and above. And then it gives you also the temperature of the U.S. standard atmosphere, temperature and pressure in pounds per square inch, and the boiling point of water at those things, and then the speed of sound. So as you go up in elevation, obviously the temperature is dropping. And at some point you get to negative 52 degrees in temperature, okay? Fahrenheit. And that elevation is 9,500 meters or 31,168 feet.
Okay.
You keep going up. The temperature keeps dropping. It's dropping. It's going negative 52, negative 57, negative 69. And it stays at negative 69.5 for quite a while as it's going up by 1,000 meters, 11,000, 12,000, 13,000, on and on and on. And eventually it gets to 30,000 meters or 98,425 feet, and the temperature rises back up to 52 degrees.
Huh.
So at 98,000 feet, 98,425 feet, it's negative 52 degrees Fahrenheit. And also at 31,000 feet, it's negative 52 degrees Fahrenheit. And she was like, "What is that do?" And it is interesting. But I was assuming that this might be because you just enter a different gas layer
Yeah, maybe.
up there.
I don't know.
It is really strange. Maybe somebody in the Snake Force can explain this to us.
Yeah.
Looks like speed of sound. Yeah, so the speed of sound. So obviously the density returns or something, because the speed of sound at 31,000 feet is 301 meters per second, 301.7. When you get all the way up to 98,000 feet, as you're going, the speed of sound is dropping. 299, 295, and then suddenly, boom, it jumps back up to 301.7.
Yeah. Yeah, there must be
More dense gas
Yeah.
up there somehow. How is it sitting up there?
I don't know.
I was wondering if this was of use to aviators. If they're like, well, I'm going to... something is optimal about 30,000 feet, right?
Yeah, that's cruising altitude.
It's cruising
for most
altitude. It's
passenger aircraft, at least.
It's like the place where you're most efficient, can go
Yeah.
the fastest,
Yeah.
using the least amount of fuel. So it's interesting to me that range at 52,000 or negative 52 degrees, 31,000 feet. I don't know. It's just strange. Anyway,
Interesting.
just a rando fact from the old Pocket Ref, gift from the Snake Force.
All right. Let's tackle a couple of emails before we wrap the show up here. This one is a bit of a book. It's called Pi. This is from Commander Xander, Snakelet in Training. Oh, ancient serpents. This email is sent to you by a wee little snake hatchling, properly known as a snakelet. After about 20 or so current episodes, I went back and started from the beginning of the vast snake library. I've made it to episode 45, and a topic has come up twice that I'd like to comment on. I apologize if you've already covered this. You'll have to forgive me, my tiny little snakelet brain is still expanding. Here it goes. Pi. The topic of pi has come up, and each time the basis of the conversation was how it's not a real number. If it's not really a real number, or if it has no end, then the conclusion you ancient serpents have come to is that it is a number that must not be of this realm. An infinite number such as pi could be the evidence of the spirit realm or a parallel universe or something of that nature. Forgive me if I'm misconstruing your interpretation, for I only have a teeny tiny snakelet brain. My thoughts were a bit different. We use pi as a tool, right? It's a tool used to measure circles. With it, we can find a circumference, a diameter, and a radius. For most applications, the decimal places 3.1459 will suffice for most any general task. For example,
14159.
Yep, that's what I thought too. For example, if two snakes were given the task of building the infrastructure for a circular grapevine with a diameter of 1 mile, then we could use pi to determine how many fence posts the snakes would need. Spaced every 8 feet or so, the decimals of 3.1459 would give us a good idea of how many fence posts were needed. But what if we needed to either increase or decrease the size of the circle, or increase the increment at which we divide their circumference? What if we needed to know exactly how many grass blades would stand shoulder to shoulder in that same 1 mile diameter circle? The decimals 3.1459 would be woefully inadequate, and the margin of error would be too great to get a definitive number of grass blades. You might have to go to 20 or 30 decimal places before you could get an accurate counting. Now let's imagine we increased the size of the circle. Let's pretend that some scientists found the absolute edge of our universe. It is an unfathomably large distance, but we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is indeed the edge. Again, we're pretending here, but if we wanted to know how many fence posts it would take to grow intergalactic grapes that circumvented the universe at a spacing of 8 feet per post, I'd imagine the number of decimal places you would need to get an accurate counting would be equally as unfathomable. Lots and lots of decimal places. Now imagine you wanted to know how many blades of grass could grow shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the universe. I'll let you guys figure out how many decimal places you would need for that. It would seem to me that decimal places would go on for forever. If that's not enough decimal places for you, perhaps we could find how many hydrogen atoms could stand shoulder to shoulder at the edge of the universe. I'll let you ancient snakes figure that one out. This snakelet is going to crack another beer. Commander Xander, snakelet in training.
Thank you, Commander.
Yeah. I agree that this is a question of precision. You know, you're asking about how precise does your calculation need to be? And that determines how many decimal places in pi you need to use. What I wasn't quite sure on with this was, at the beginning you were saying, well, you guys came to the conclusion that it's not of this universe or it's evidence of a spirit realm.
I do remember that conversation.
Yeah.
Talking about is the reason why these numbers that seem to be fundamental are not definable.
Yeah.
And does that suggest? I think you were the one saying this.
I was.
Does that
absolutely.
suggest that they arrive from some other realm or something like?
Yeah,
they are definable.
That was my suggestion. That's what I'm saying. So maybe I'm nitpicking here, but he says you seem to have come to this conclusion, and I'm like, no, bro. This was just a wild speculative suggestion.
Yeah. No. It's a certificate of ignorance. So, boy, there's no conclusions here.
Right. It was an interesting thought experiment that I was running through in my mind. Like, you know, I had been at the time working through Laird Scranton's stuff, and he talks about these two realms, and I was also thinking about this idea of the warp and the woof, and these realms like interacting with each other. Like you see some of this in some Celtic mythology. So I was thinking like, well, okay, so maybe some of these fundamental numbers that are actually non-real, and that I mean that in the mathematical sense, in the kind of definition of numbers.
Yeah, so I looked it up. I mean, it's like a real number is a continuous one-dimensional quantity, such as a distance or duration or temperature. So it can be almost uniquely represented by an infinite decimal expansion and is the combination of rational and irrational numbers in the number system. I don't understand that second statement.
Well, I mean, look up what
infinite decimal expansion. Does that just mean like? What does that mean?
Look at what they call pi is. Is it irrational or is it no? Is it irrational? I can't remember. There's two of them. Don't recall off the top of my head.
Is the watcher still around?
Watcher's asleep. Don't wake him up.
Yeah, I won't. The old man needs to sleep. Pi is an irrational number that cannot be represented by a common fraction. This has been proven by proof by a contradiction written in 1873 using the characterization of pi as the smallest positive number whose half is a zero of the cosine function.
So it's a ratio, it can be defined in other ways, but if you're trying to sit down and write it out as a number, you can't express it in its totality, in its precise form. It's impossible to do. And
Right.
I've gotten, it's interesting,
It's about
right?
precision, like you said,
it's about precision. People have said, well, maybe it's because we use base 10, or maybe it's, it doesn't matter. It cannot be expressed.
Because you're
in
talking
its
talking about the relationship between the circumference and the radius.
That's right.
There's no reason why that number should be whole.
Right. But it's also non-repeating. And this is like,
that's interesting.
People have gone to great lengths to say, well, maybe there's
it
a
repeats,
gigantic repetition. Like once you get to 5 billion digits, it suddenly starts over. No. As far as we can tell,
It still doesn't
It
repeat.
does not repeat.
And there's no pattern within it.
There's no pattern. It's non-repeating. It is not expressible.
How long can you express like 10 different characters that don't repeat? Like, is it infinitely possible to express 10 different characters in a way?
No, you will.
Yeah, because I guess you could do ones for a billion ones and then never do that again.
Right.
Therefore, it doesn't repeat.
All right. You can find repeating patterns inside of
small.
it.
Yeah.
But itself
Yeah, it's whole. Okay,
is non-repeating.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Every possible iteration of the expression of the usage of however many base numerals you want to use, whether you're using 16
I
or
figured
10.
it out when I was asking the question.
Yeah.
It's like you could have there be just one of the digits almost forever and then a different one.
Right. And then you do
then-
that same one digit,
But not
for
quite
minus one times.
Yeah.
And then a different number, and it is non-repeating.
That's right. Yeah, dang it.
As long as that doesn't happen again and again and again, right? That's the point.
Yeah.
And maybe, and it's possible. I don't think so. It may be,
Is this a function
I
of the
don't
base
understand the
system?
mathematical proofs, but,
They have a
they
proof
basically
here.
say, like, yeah, it's been shown that you can't do it, right?
The proof that pi is irrational, they've got this little look at how advanced our graphics are on this video. This is really highly advanced. I gotta make sure I'm even looking at this. Where am I? Okay, here we go. There's the proof. I don't know what this means. I can't make the phone straight. There we go. But yeah, it's like they're claiming like, yeah, this is figured out and it's irrational. It
Yeah.
doesn't- it
So all I'm
cannot be
saying is
represented
one day I'm driving the tractor or whatever it is I was doing, and I start thinking about this number and how it's fun. And phi is like this too. It's not expressible in a numerical system. You can only express it as a ratio between two different
You can express it geometrically,
yeah.
but not in numbers. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, you can express it geometrically, and of course that
It is
that
expressed
comes down to
every- yeah,
precision as
right.
well.
Yeah.
Like if you try to draw a circle, it ain't perfect.
But it has a value
right.
that is not expressible in a numbering system.
So give it a character and move on.
Yeah, you give it a symbol.
That's
and
cool.
everyone who's using the symbol it understands that, well, not everyone, but using the symbol, it's understood that the number of digits you care to use is about the precision you require for that calculation.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So yes, I completely agree with what you said, Commander Xander. What you were saying about how many digits of pi you need to use is up to the precision you need for your calculation is true. But that is, that's just a bit of an aside from what we were originally discussing about the nature of the number itself.
Strange things are afoot at the cube. Don't know what it means.
But thank you. It's great to bring up that conversation again.
It's so strange
Okay.
that they are fundamental and that their ratios are just not expressible in the number system. That's just so weird.
And so you can ask, like, well, the number system is an abstract creation.
Of course, it is.
Of of humans, no matter what base you're using. I think Graham from Grimerica suggested to me that, or maybe it was Darren that said this. He just said, he said, maybe we can't express it properly because we just don't know how, because our numbering system isn't the right one to use. And he's kind of right? Like you said, it can be expressed geometrically. It is. That's its nature. What's happening?
Well, we just left the call, but that's all
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Watcher totally passed out. That's what happened.
poor guy. Oh, we appreciate him hanging out
Yeah.
when he could.
Your emails make him sleep.
Yeah. All right, let's get more emails. We gotta plow through these. That's a good one, man.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, because
Yeah,
I could
we
sit
could
here
go
and pound
off.
on this point all day.
we can go off on that conversation for sure.
All right, one more, because it's another book, and we're
No,
We're out of time
We're
here.
gonna make this segment
Nope.
just about as long as the other ones. We can't keep giving
I
short
can.
shrift to this.
I can totally
segment.
do. This is my show. I can do what I want,
I will not stop recording.
but I will get up and leave.
Looks like you're stuck with me, folks. Just me and you.
Okay, so this is another from Terry, TJ in the Discord. Random thoughts and snaky ideas, he says. Greetings, oh great and wise oracles of the Serpentine Brotherhood. Hello from frigid Canada and our current polar vortex. I am taking a break from binging your back catalog to reach out and share a few of my thoughts with you. I am enjoying the various book reports and guests, as well as the presentations by Marty and Tony. Also the swap casts, especially with Uncharted X, but the brain expansion is definitely 33% or more. I feel the need to share some of my humble thoughts, even if they are speculative. One of the ideas that came to mind concerns the idea of the archaic records of long lives in antiquity and biblical times and the concept of immortality. The idea of the apparent centuries of rule by Enlil and Enki. I have been considering the polished granite boxes of the Serapeum and their possible uses in the light of these concepts. Would it be a possibility that those were part of some sort of suspended animation devices or even regeneration chambers? Either of those would explain the long reigns and extended ages. It might also explain the ancient Egyptians' obsession with the sarcophagus, as that might have been their attempt to emulate their gods. The alcoves might have been where the machinery that made the boxes work were placed. Perhaps some kind of focusing of earth energies, be it electric or magnetic or gravitational or sonic vibrations or possibly both. Maybe I'm grasping at straws, but thinking outside the box is the Snake Force way, is it not? Another thought I have been considering relates to the Ark of the Covenant and the Great Pyramid. I read somewhere that the box in the King's Chamber was slightly larger than the size given for the Ark. It was suggested that the Ark acted as a capacitor in the Great Pyramid, helping to stabilize and control the power output of the power plant, as suggested by Christopher Dunn. If Moses was an acolyte of the Egyptian priesthood, and possibly even actually Akhenaten, he would have had access to the Great Pyramid and theoretically the opportunity to steal the Ark. It's still possible it could be opened and used to store the tables. As to the death of unprotected people who would die with the symptoms similar to radiation sickness, is it possible that the tables of the Ten Commandments were written on or made of a radioactive material of some kind? Just speculating, but this is the fun part, isn't it? And one last random thought concerns the book I recommended by Ignatius Donnelly concerning a comet impact which may have caused a crustal shift. In the book, he theorizes that the gravel and sandy part of the nucleus, together with the clay-like material, caused much of the drift, now referred to as till, that covers much of the Americas and parts of Europe and Africa. He suggests that approximately 12,000 years ago, a large comet impact in the Great Lakes area caused widespread earthquakes, massive widespread fires, poisonous gas clouds, massive floods, and long extreme winters. Some of his ideas are dated, but the majority of his proposal fits within the comet impact hypothesis and the thoughts of Antonio Zamora, in my humble opinion.
Who was this? I'm sorry.
Ignatius Donnelly.
Ignatius Donnelly. Okay.
I just finished episode 201, the 200th podcast celebration, and even though I'm late to the party, I'd like to add my appreciation for all that you do and congratulate you on passing 200, and I look forward to the 300th and beyond. Thanks for all of you do and for giving voice to the many topics and questions I've been interested in for years with no one to bounce ideas off of. You two have created a unique and wonderful community of like-minded individuals that is definitely needed in this world. Hats off to you both. In appreciation, I upped my Patreon level. It's not much,
Wow.
but I want to do my part as best I can. Until next time, keep slithering onwards and questioning everything. Snakes! From Terry, TJ, in the Discord.
Thanks, bro. Damn. So I like the second two speculative parts more than the first one with the Serapeum because I feel like that one's
Well, first of all, the Serapeum is the one that's our favorite to destroy your ideas on.
That's true. I want to crush it like a beer can.
I'm happy that people are still brave enough to email their Serapeum ideas to us so that we can crush them. And don't worry, folks, we crush all of our own Serapeum
This is what I was going to say, is that he was talking about listening to these early episodes, and I know, I know we were doing so much speculation on many different things. Like, dude.
Yeah.
You know, and I get that, but I think, I was just thinking about this while listening, you know, to your email, that this podcast has made me way more careful with speculation on specific sites like that. And I don't know if it's learning, like I feel like I've learned a whole lot about the scientific method with a lot of these book reports we've gone through and just learning from these guys that went through and attacked these crazy mysteries and just like picking out little bits of information and the way they put it together. That kind of stuff is just, I don't know, it's inspired me, but at the same time, just learning from that, I sort of pick apart my own speculation. It's like, well, I don't know this, I don't know that. So that's already an assumption before I even start speculating on stuff. And that's kind of where you lost me on the Serapeum, is it takes, you have to have so many assumptions before you even get to that point.
Yeah.
That it's like, yeah, that's a cool idea, but can I put any stock in it? I just...
Yeah, can we how do we
Can we
talk,
learn something
can we
from it?
discuss the mysteries of the Serapeum with the fewest assumptions necessary? In other words, that's the way to like to grow your understanding of it, right? Let's not assume anything and say, well, here's what we know about it. And this is the thing we started the show with, which is why this email was great. We started the show saying going to Egypt taught us how much we didn't know about that place.
That's true.
And this is why it makes it difficult for me to now speculate on other sites that I haven't been to. This is why I'm like, we got to go to Peru. We got to go see these other places.
Yeah.
We got to go to Baalbek. Because the amount of change that happened in my mind about the stuff that we had been talking about for years, like the Serapeum from Egypt, from being able to go there and put your hands on it and see it yourself and really get some details that you just don't find anywhere. That a lot of the stuff you find immediately just makes all that a lot of the speculation we did before just completely irrelevant.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
And so this is what's fun about this whole process. We've gone through this process.
But I'll also say that, like, so just going through this step by step, if you start out with like, okay, so there's texts that describe people living for a really long time.
Yeah.
So if I take that at face value, and then I'm like, well, how did they live a really long time? And then I look at an ancient site and say, well, maybe I can connect this. So that's basically what he's doing. Is like, maybe these boxes, they got in these boxes and there was some kind of energies and it rejuvenated them and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's assuming that you're correct, that the texts are describing actual people
That's right.
and physical life. And it's like, yeah, it's just like, I'm not even going to, I don't know if I'm just going to go to the next step from there because I don't have enough data.
Yeah. And usually the answer is, could this be this way? The answer is sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
Doesn't mean that that's what it is, though, but you're just like, well, I mean, yeah, given all those things that you postulated, then yes, maybe this could be that. But that's like Kyle's saying, it's so far down the line of saying, well, let's take this as true and let's make this assumption and then say, well, then they had these things and they could also build machines and there was suspended animation and then and you're way down this line and you're like, and so that's why the Egyptians like sarcophagi, because they were basically a cargo cult of this thing, and you're okay. So you've basically gone down this road of like, and I know you're not doing this, Terry, but I'm saying in general, you go down this road of like, let's explain everything. But you're stacking so many assumptions in there. And this is just, I mean, it's the nature of the game. Obviously, it's fun to speculate.
For sure.
But the other thing, and speculation is, we do it here on the show all the time.
We were doing it earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
What if the universe was
how many
spirits of fucking
simulations?
And that's why we created ourselves, so that we could study the universe more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. But
consider your Serapeum theory destroyed.
the main thing to keep in mind is that those speculations are fun, but in the end, you have to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there's just not enough data.
Yeah. But I think he was doing it in the spirit of the podcast.
Sure,
anyway.
yeah.
Especially episode 40.
Yeah.
Feet.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Thank you so much. Next.
No, that's it.
No, we're almost. Oh, yeah, you're right. We're there. Okay. All right. I got something here. Big thanks. Big thanks to everybody sending Russ emails, bothering him in the morning. Appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, they're trolling me, bro.
Yeah, they are trolling. Don't you have one? You had one I asked you to read. It's a short one.
You asked me to mark it. I did.
Come on, man. Okay, I have a couple of announcements. One, oh no, I need to pause the show because I don't remember this person's name.
Well, I will say, I don't know if you can figure it out, but I will say they've been trolling me, and I'm getting lots of emails that start out with "Good morning, Grumpy," and I'm just letting you guys know, Grumpy Morning Russ reads those emails from top to bottom, and then puts them directly into the trash. That's where they go. Grumpy guys don't want to be called grumpy in the morning, and they don't want to hear "Good morning, Grumpy," for sure.
God dang it.
So thank you for all the trolling. Because right now
awesome.
I'm not Grumpy Morning Russ, so I can say, yeah, it's hilarious. But Grumpy Morning Russ does not want to hear that shit. And he throws those emails directly in the trash. But I really appreciate all the trolling.
It's great, dude. Yeah. Troll him up. I get to hear about it, at least. It's awesome. Big thanks to Ann Who Knits. Longtime supporter of the show, and we love you. And we've developed a relationship with Ann, and I just have to say it's been really awesome from your emails to your gifts and your support of the show and I don't know. It's just like your relationship with Laura and through Laura, the kids and everything has just been so cool.
Yeah,
so
I still have the beautiful knitted, I don't know what to call it. It's not really a blanket. It's a big square knitted thing she made specifically for the cat.
Oh, yeah.
And he loves that thing. I've got it.
We have one of the knitted
Yeah.
Blankets on our bed, like diagonally
Yeah.
on top of the whole
They're
thing.
awesome.
It's
They're
just
amazing
beautiful.
with like sacred geometry patterns. It's awesome. Yeah.
So she is.
And gifter of cephalopods.
Yes. The one trinket that I
That's right.
that I do display in the cube in the brand new revived cube. And so she is executive producer of this show with a $100 donation to the Pyramid Scheme. And she writes, "Happy vernal equinox, St. Patrick's Day, daylight savings time." And she says, with this donation, which she often tells me what to do with the donations.
Oh, yeah. The donations with qualifications.
She says, buy Russ some Turkish coffee every day. And I have to say, I back that 100%. When we go to Turkey, Russ is getting Turkish coffee every day. So last time she asked me to buy pizza for everybody else, and I said no. But buying Russ Turkish coffee every day, yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
That's the other thing I was going to say in the emails I've gotten is like, there people are like, listen, Grumpy Morning Russ, here's how you need to make your coffee. And they start giving me all this coffee advice.
Have you tried it?
Well, they're telling me to do what I already do.
Oh,
So I'm sitting there
Yeah, so
grumpy
you've tried.
going, I know. I already know that.
I would just tell you guys, I have discovered I stopped eating dairy. I know this sounds terrible. It was an experiment, and it's actually really good. I stopped eating dairy. It's been great. Although I love dairy. I ate so much cheese. I drank so much milk, heavy cream in my coffee. I miss it so much. But anyway, I'm drinking nut milk now.
Nut sap.
Almond milk. I know. I used to make fun of people that drank almond milk so hard. Anyways,
Have you tried oat milk?
I have. Well, yes.
Oat
I have.
milk?
I have, but I was like, it's more carbs.
Yeah, that's true.
So, anyways, almond milk, and I tried I put some almond milk in my coffee, and it's just like dark brown. No, it's bad, not good. And when you put heavy cream in your coffee, you don't have to sweeten it. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
You just put a lot of espresso in the cup, dump a chunk of heavy cream in there.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it is.
And iced like that. Oh
Iced
my
is
God,
really good,
it's
yeah.
the best. Anyways, so what I discovered is I need this much almond milk and that much espresso
Oh.
and then a bunch of ice. And it's
Okay.
it's actually quite good, and it's a refreshing drink. Because I would make these giant cups of it for all day at work, in a
a thermos.
thermos. So I've been doing it with almond milk, and it's great. I mean, it's not as great as dairy, but it's definitely suffice. The other, I don't want to stop the video. It's a huge pain in the butt, but I just want to say, whoever sent me the box wine, because I can't remember your name, and I'm sorry about that, but I will find it. Just not on this show.
The box of the bottles of wine.
Yeah, he sent me the box of bottles of wine.
Yeah.
That were made from not box wine, that were made from wine winemaking kits.
yeah.
So it's like you buy the juice concentrate.
Yeah.
And so he had all these these bottles of red wine in there. And I was just thinking, he was saying he made them in 2018, and I was like, man, he's making this wine in his house, and I was just like,
He's skeptical.
I was very skeptical. I was like, I don't know if these wines are going to be any good, but hey, thanks, buddy. Anyway, we've been drinking them. Me and Laura are just like, damn, these are good wines.
Cool.
So, dude, you are a good winemaker, and you did well with these kit wines. So yeah, we've been enjoying them, and I just wanted to say you did a great job.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
You know
And
who
I'm
you are.
sorry I don't have your name in front of me right now. I feel really bad about that. But it was written on a piece of paper and not digital, and
Yeah.
I'm not good with paper.
Yeah. You know who you are.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll cut that whole part out.
Brothers
and
of
go get
the
his
Serpent
number.
at gmail.com. You're not cutting anything out.
I know.
Zero mistakes.
That's right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
brothersoftheserpent.com for all the podcast related stuff. You can find links there to donate if you want to support the show. This is value for value. So if you get value out of the show, you can give us value back through Patreon or PayPal. And we really appreciate that. The donations we use is always for the podcast. We buy more equipment, or we buy things to help us on the trips. Our supporters have saved our asses sometimes when we've been on tours and things go wrong. So thank you guys so much for everybody who supports the show. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.